Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome to this recorded session. It's Monday, the 8th of March, 2021, and my name is Derick Mitchell. I'm the CEO of IPPOSI, and this recorded session is being performed with three members of the IPPOSI board, representing patient groups, academic science, and healthcare industry. And we're doing it in conjunction with the launch of the new IPPOSI strategy for 2021 to 2024. It's been a year since we started this process of developing our new strategy, and we're delighted to launch it today. It's centered on IPPOSI's mission, which is the collective voice of patient science and industry in Ireland. And it is the culmination of a lot of work done through both IPPOSI staff and board and members and stakeholders, with the input of hundreds of members and individuals along the way. So it's with great enjoyment that we're going to discuss this with the three board members. And we hope it gives, I think, anybody who's listening or watching a little bit of insight as to the relevance of the IPPOSI strategy over the next 4 years, not just for our individual members, but indeed for the healthcare environment as a whole in Ireland. So IPPOSI was established in 2005 by patient groups in Ireland, by a visionary group of individuals from patient groups, but also academic science and industry. And it was first developed as along the lines of a think tank model. But over the years, I think it's fair to say that as IPPOSI has grown in strength and in numbers in terms of our members, but also in terms of the influence that we've had of bringing together consensus and dialogue and interactions in the healthcare space. IPPOSI is now at a stage where, yes, we can say that we're far more confident in our horizons as to what maybe the limits of our ambitions are over the next 4 years. And we've set those down in a series of strategic objectives and targeted aims over the next 4 years, where we're going to be targeting activities and actions designed to address unmet health needs for patients in Ireland. So without further ado, I'll introduce the panel today. And the first person is David McMahon. David is the current chair of IPPOSI. David is the CEO of the Irish Skin Foundation, representing patient organizations. The second person is Professor Gaye Stephens of Trinity College Dublin, and Gaye is representing our academic science membership. And Susanne O'Reilly of Novartis, and Susanne is representing our healthcare industry members. So all three of you are very welcome today. And I'll kick off with, I think, a general, more kind of a common question, in fact, to David. And it's very much around what part of the strategy, I think, are you most looking forward to? Or indeed, what part of the strategy do you think that IPPOSI can potentially make the biggest impact in?
Yeah, I suppose when you look through the strategy document, you can really see how it has been shaped by a lot of different voices in the healthcare sector. And in one sense, when you look over it, the document is quite high level and quite general. But when you read through, in particular, the involvement agenda and the education agenda, I think you can really see where there is an overlap of consensus with, particularly for patient organizations. I think they're probably two of the more exciting pillars from our point of view, from my point of view, I suppose, coming from the Irish Skin Foundation. I think there's a lot in it. There's a lot in it in terms of opportunities for patients to, I suppose, become more empowered, in particular in terms of helping them to articulate their voices, helping people to be able to meaningfully engage and influence public policy, and I suppose engage better in decision making for themselves and for the patient groups that they work with. That's something I suppose that sticks out for me very much. I think the involvement agenda as well. Within the strategy, you can see that there are different elements that the IPPOSI has chosen that are going to kind of forward the overall three top line things to achieve under that pillar. But it really does also set a tone. And I think that's something I noticed from IPPOSI from when it was founded in 2005, that there is a very important tone of engagement, of involvement, of how to work well with patients and how to involve patients more. And I find that has been kind of woven very well through those two pillars. So that's what sticks out for me. And I think that's very exciting to see for my own patient group, but I think it's a really great example to all patient groups of how to do this kind of work.
Thanks, David. And maybe if I might just follow up on that. So in terms of the areas there that you've highlighted, are there any areas that you think IPPOSI has the potential to make the biggest inroads in, or to move the needle the most in?
Yeah, and I think, I like that phrase that you used, move the needle, because it's sort of, it really sort of encapsulates in a way what we are all trying to do. I guess, the two things for me that would probably stick out, and that I know have always been on IPPOSI's agenda, but are really on the top of patient organizations' agendas, are access to innovation, and which is basically, I suppose in Ireland, I still feel we're too slow. We're not doing well. We're sometimes, we're at the very back of the queue when we compare ourselves with our European peers. And IPPOSI's work to build consensus, to articulate that consensus, to forward that consensus into the halls of power, or to where decisions are made, is critical. And I suppose IPPOSI offers patient organizations in particular as an opportunity to sort of step outside of their own focused advocacy work for a while, and look at what other patient organizations have in common with them, and try together to advance that as a multiplicity of groups with industry and science input as well. So there's that side, the innovation side, and then there is the health information piece, and which I know IPPOSI has been working on for a long time in different ways and through different conferences and talks. But we really should be doing far better on our health records, and we can see even at the moment perhaps how some of our public health initiatives the execution of some of the decisions that we're making on that level are being hampered because we don't have that in place in the way we should do for a small, innovative, focused country. And I think they are two things that IPPOSI, they're two big macro health policy things that IPPOSI can work on, and, as you say, move the needle over the next few years.
Thanks, David. I might very quickly turn to Gaye Stephens. Gaye, as somebody who's been involved in the health informatics sector for many years, and I guess has struggled along with the rest of us to try and see how we can move that forward. Is what David's described there in terms of what we need to do now, does that ring true with you? And that's my first question. The second question is, it's not all roses and sweetness and light in the IPPOSI strategy. It was hard fought for in many cases. And are there any particular challenges that maybe you see that isn't maybe coming through in that lovely glossy document?
Yeah, thanks, Derick. Yeah, I think from my perspective on what David has said, IPPOSI have been involved, in engaging and partnering with patients around the topic of health information for a long time now, and we've had lots of valuable contribution from the members. I think and I think we are going forward in a way that's moving the dial in the direction of changing the infrastructure for that patient engagement. It isn't actually about the topics that are coming up, because the topics are always going to change, and whatever health information infrastructure we put in will always change. So it's more about the infrastructure that needs to be in place. So our current, initiative, like the Citizens Jury initiative, is a really good example of something that could go forward and be in part and embedded in the system. And as new topics come up, we can address them in that way. So I think the infrastructure for patient involvement in health information solutions is crucial. If you look at any of the information systems that have failed around the world in healthcare, it's because they didn't get the involvement correct at the beginning. And it can't be a once-off involvement, it has to be continuous. Things are changing all the time, and we have to keep going back. As citizens, I think a lot of citizens are involved and interested in being involved in this. So I think that's getting the infrastructure right, I think is, and that's in the strategy, and it's part of what IPPOSI have been doing anyway for the last number of years. So it's a good continuation of that foundation that we've put in place. On the second question of the the challenges that we have, I think healthcare is such a complex world. It's if we think of it's multidisciplinary. There's so many different specialities in it, and there's so many partners and stakeholders in it. And if I just take even from my own background of health informatics, people like ethicists, human-computer interaction people, it's so diverse that I think the challenge will be to see where is the impact being made, because there could be impacts that are impacting in ways that are not so visible at the moment. They may take a number of years to become visible, but we're laying down a foundation for how things. So I think that there is a challenge in communicating the impact that IPPOSI is making.
Thanks, Gaye. That's certainly something that we've heard over the years from many different authorities on the matter of how maybe small, non-profit, policy-oriented organizations can actually capture the impact that they're having at that national level, which often, particularly if you're operating in the health information space, can take almost decades to come to fruition. So certainly not an insurmountable challenge, but certainly something that IPPOSI needs to work with others in terms of capturing that impact and putting in maybe some form of an impact framework to really concretely measure it. I'll turn to Susanne. Susanne, as Novartis have been, I think, a long-standing IPPOSI member, and indeed are heavily involved in the health innovation space across a number of disciplines and areas. Is there particular relevance for the IPPOSI strategy for either your own company's place in this space, or indeed are there particular areas that you're most looking forward to under the new strategy?
Sure, Derek, and thanks very much for letting us have this opportunity to kind of discuss the IPPOSI strategy. I suppose one area that I'll answer the second question first, if that's okay. I suppose one area that I'd be really looking forward to with the new strategy is, I suppose, broadening that IPPOSI industry membership. So it's broadening to including digital health and medical device companies, and I think that's really, really important, and I think we will get great new insights and ideas from those groups. So that's kind of one thing that I suppose I'm really looking forward to. Just going back to your other question, I suppose from a Novartis point of view, there are kind of many elements that are very relevant for us. If I look in particular at kind of the whole involvement pillar, all the work that IPPOSI does in terms of connecting patients and patient groups and giving those people opportunities to get involved in the healthcare system. That is really, really important because we have challenges, as David has alluded to, in our healthcare system. And I do believe that that patient voice helps drive change and drive change faster. So I suppose that would be my first point. And then secondly, the work and the strategy in terms of kind of promoting that digital transformation of healthcare, which I suppose we've really seen during this COVID pandemic, the importance of this, the importance for patients, the importance to actually be able to run the healthcare system. So it is great that such a good pivot has been done, but I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done to kind of optimize that patient experience and to make it kind of better for patients and better for all involved. And then I suppose, lastly, you know, we really need kind of Irish-based, educated patients for clinical trials, for clinical research in Ireland, so as we can really compete on the international stage. And it's also really important that we have greater capacity and I suppose greater education and learning for patient groups as well, so that they can make those compelling HTA reimbursements submissions, which will help that challenge that David was talking about already in terms of access to innovative new medicines.
Thanks, Susanne. So what strikes me about what you're saying there is that it's very clear in terms of that access to innovation piece that patient priorities and maybe healthcare industry priorities are aligned in terms of speedier access, greater transparency, greater involvement of patients. Is there any particular area that you've seen over the last while and maybe looking forward under the new strategy that you would see hope for how those kind of maybe partnership approaches can be brought into the healthcare sector, not just on maybe the access side, but indeed on the innovation side?
Yeah, no, and I do think I think we've kind of seen examples of that. One area that's really important is for us to develop, and it's within the strategy, that whole public-private partnership. And once again, we've seen the importance during COVID of the need for this. As Gaye mentioned, our healthcare system is complex, it's diverse, it's challenged. You know, we all need to work together. We need those public and private partnerships to kind of, I suppose, bring about that innovation a little bit faster for patients. A really good example is the COVID Tracker app, where you had, you know, a private company providing that platform, which has, you know, been of such great value for the public and for the public system.
Thanks, Susanne. I'm conscious that we've given you the kind of easy questions to date, and those are the ones that probably are easiest to come up with answers to. If I was to think about maybe a more challenging question about maybe the relevance of the IPPOSI strategy right now, that we've seen over in recent weeks that the Health Research Board, the Science Foundation Ireland, the HSE corporate strategy, there's been a number of I guess long-term strategies. How relevant, or maybe even how aligned, is the IPPOSI strategy with the other more national level health innovation relevant strategies? Does anybody want to kind of maybe see where there's good opportunities for IPPOSI?
I take that, Derick.
Yeah, okay, if you want to go.
So I just see the whole, you know, research infrastructure in Ireland is one that, you know, we should step back, as David said, and take a look, you know, as patients and citizens and academics, industry, step back and take a look at that process and how, you know, if we take the view that we partner with citizens and patients to come up with research questions, I think that should be nearly our initial starting point for everything. You're not going to have patient involvement across the entire research infrastructure in some areas. In some you will, and some you won't. But the research should really be driven, you know, from the patient or citizen's point of view. And I think that the HRB and all of that in the Science Foundation Ireland infrastructure in Ireland, they are getting that a bit more. You know, there are criteria in the funding mechanisms, you know, to allow for that. I think where there's maybe a shortfall and where IPPOSI may be ahead of the curve is it's at the other end. You know, how do we know that we've had a successful piece of research? You know, the patients need to be in at the end of it, you know, in saying, yes, this worked, and yes, it could scale up. And I think that, you know, industry can play a role in that they can bring things to, you know, innovative ideas into reality. But we need to make sure that they're based on sound research that allows those innovations to scale and to be of use to, you know, to all patients. You know, if we take the analogy of, you know, even our phones that we use, we're used to knowing that there's either an iPhone or an Android as the two main, you know, competing phones, and people build applications for them. The last thing we want is, you know, 1,000 different platforms for healthcare that are based, you know, industry-based ones that are just coming out and that, you know, we don't know what the standards are behind it. I think that that's where academia can come in, is to put those, you know, standard-based systems in place that are coming from a sound research questions from patients, but also have good impact for patients on the other end. So I think in some ways IPPOSI is ahead of the curve, that you know, it's looking for that impact, but maybe the national infrastructure isn't there yet with measuring that outcome at that end.
Thanks, Gaye. I would certainly have my own thoughts on that in terms of the research infrastructure. Certainly, we've seen changes, I think, even very recently in terms of the patient and public involvement through the funding provided by the likes of the HRB and IRC, but also around things like that age-old question of how our research ethics environment can become far more structured. David or Susanne, do you wish to kind of comment there from your own perspective about the infrastructure and maybe how that's changing and what role IPPOSI can play?
I mean, I suppose I would just say about, you know, say from a patient organization's point of view, say maybe less from an individual patient's point of view. I think that you know, a lot of patient organizations are being approached quite a lot about all different kinds of research. Now that might be something simple like a survey or being involved in somebody's PhD or in a much wider multi-university international kind of study. And you know, organizations have with pinch points in terms of our capacities sort of to engage with certain studies. Now, actually, I have found you find industry, particularly where industry are involved, like there's a lot of understanding of that. I think sometimes when you are working with academic institutions, that maybe there isn't a full appreciation of the level of work that a patient organization might have to contribute behind the scenes. You know, so they can kind of understand how this will all work and how does it dovetail with their own strategy. How do their boards, how do their members, like, you know, understand you know, what, you know, how this time and how this focus has been, you know, deployed. You know, and I think there is a certain amount of work to be done there. But I think things are improving all of the time. And you know, certainly we've been involved with a number of different initiatives, and some of them are wonderfully managed, and they're very cognizant of how they work with us, how they work with the patients who we may put them in touch with, you know, so I suppose I think IPPOSI probably has perhaps a role in helping industry maybe put some minimum standards and perhaps some principle-based sort of, not rules, but maybe principle-based guidelines that might help patient organizations understand and explain to themselves internally and their members how they are working on individual research projects.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I think is where it's not called out explicitly in the new strategy. It's certainly almost implicit in terms of what we're saying. If the IPPOSI model of partnership is to be built upon, it would certainly have to have that as a starting point. That there is no point in either patient groups or indeed individual patients being being pulled so thinly across a number of different maybe opportunities, or indeed not given the correct supports or guidance as to how to navigate an increasingly complex partnership environment. That has to be our starting point. And certainly we've seen the impact of COVID on patient groups in terms of the just either the funding or the ability to actually plan long term. That's certainly an issue across many patient groups, I know. But also I think it's incumbent on the state to actually recognize the role that patient groups actually are continuing to play as real innovators across service, across research, across innovation, across policy. So there needs to be almost a kind of a different framework of engagement of how the state and patient groups can work together. So certainly something we'll be contributing to over the next few years. So with that, I'll probably just call a halt and thank you all for your contributions to today. It's been the usual dynamic conversations that we have at IPPOSI board meetings, and certainly I would encourage any IPPOSI member, if you are considering getting involved or more involved in IPPOSI, that you might look at the IPPOSI board as a potential opportunity for you. We have 2 current spaces on the board, and I would love to hear from you if you have any questions on that front. So again, I'd like to thank all of the board members and all of the IPPOSI staff and members for the development of the strategy. Obviously, a strategy is only as good as the paper it's written on. It will actually be living and breathing over the next 4 years in terms of our actions and activities, and we will certainly look forward to engaging with our members and stakeholders on those. So with that, I'll say adios, and we'll hasta pronto. So see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you very much, Derick.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.